The Hamas in Gaza is one arm of the Islamic Republic of Iran. They armed them, they trained them, they encouraged them, they helped to create a worldwide campaign against Israel and the Jews and to infiltrate different groups in order to affect public opinion. This has been done for years and years in Europe, in Canada, in Australia, in America, and so on.
The events of October 7th caused enormous pain for every Israeli, regardless of your religious, political, social, economic background, whatever part of the country you live in. Israelis have been reeling. And over the past year, we've been talking to just a wide range of Israelis to get their perspective and to understand how they see where we are, how we got here, but also where we're going. And you're going to hear the perspective of someone who's super interesting, a dear friend who was a member of Knesset. She served on the Abraham Accords Allies Caucus. She chaired that. She is a close colleague of Benny Gantz, who was a war cabinet minister in the early stages of this war in a national unity government, but that government has unraveled. She is a former senior advisor to Israeli President Shimon Peres, and she's got a lot of experience, not only as an Israeli coming from South Africa originally, but also in the Arab world, particularly in Egypt. But also, I've spent time with her at a conference in the United Arab Emirates. I think that's where we first actually met. So welcome to the Inside the Epicenter podcast. I'm Joel Rosenberg, co-founder of the Joshua Fund with my wife, Lynn. The Joshua Fund exists to bless Israel and her neighbors in the name of Jesus. We're evangelical Christians. We work with Jews, we work with Muslims, we work with people of different faiths, all faiths, but we are evangelical Christians. And part of the Joshua Fund's mission is to educate Christians in the United States, Canada, and all over the world to better understand what is happening here so they know how to pray, and that they would understand where and how to give if they want to make a difference and be a blessing. And so Inside the Epicenter is sort of the flagship podcast educational effort, though we also do conferences. We do tours, not right now, unfortunately, but and all kinds of speaking and other multimedia to help get the word out and engage Christians, particularly young Christians who don't know what they really think about Israel and biblically, politically, or in any other way. So let me welcome my friend, Ruth Wasserman Lande. Ruth, thank you so much for coming on. This is your first time on the podcast. It's great to be with you, but we're at a hard inflection point at the 1-year anniversary of October 7th, and I appreciate you taking the time to be with us.
Thank you so much for having me on this platform, on this important platform. And I feel that it's a calling to be able to explain to those who cannot be expected to understand the depth and the width and the length and the absolute incomprehensible dimension of the evil that we had experienced on October 7th. It's very difficult to comprehend. In fact, it almost sounds like a horror movie, something out of Hollywood. But this was a reality, and a reality which we need to comprehend more deeply in terms of a perception of a certain side, and see what needs to be and can be done in order to make it go away. Because it's literally goodies versus baddies in this scenario.
Would you walk us through, before I get to some sort of where we are today and some of the political fights about how do we handle getting the hostages out? There's been some real knockdown, drag-out battles in the cabinet. I do want to get your perspective on those things in Lebanon and where we're going, Iran. But I wonder if you'd just take us back to October 7th yourself. I haven't asked you about this. You were one of my first guests on the Rosenberg report when we were dealing with this right away, but I haven't asked you, what were you doing that day and in the days that followed? Well, how did it affect you and your family and your immediate close friends?
Okay, so I'll try and illustrate it in a way that I hope will bring it a little bit closer to people's hearts. I don't live in the south of Israel. I live actually in the northern part of the Sharon. So it's about 45 minutes north of Tel Aviv. In the very
She's talking about the Sharon Valley, which stretches from Tel Aviv north. I don't know if it goes quite all the way to Haifa, but that's sort of a high-tech corridor. And it's near the beach. Not everybody lives near the beach, but I mean in that valley. Yeah.
Let me just emphasize, the western part of it is right by the beach, but it's a narrow waistline of Israel. If anybody remembers the map, it's the narrow part. But the eastern side actually borders, it's Israel proper, undisputed Israel, but it borders on Tulkarem, on the Palestinian Authority, the autonomy, so-called, of the Palestinians in the West Bank, and all those lovely towns that are inhabited right now by Palestinians, and this is important, where Abu Mazen, the internationally recognized president of the Palestinian people, is in fact ruling. Why am I telling you this? Because on October 7th, which was a Saturday, it was a Shabbat, it was a Jewish festival, I woke up before the children, and before, we usually wake up on Shabbat. It's the only day we can wake up a little bit later. Because of the zillions of messages we got on our WhatsApp and on our phones, basically beginning to describe in a lot of confusion, because people didn't quite know in the early morning hours what on earth was going on, but that there was some kind of an attack, some kind of an intrusion by operative Hamas fighters and terrorists, and that there were some people killed. We didn't know exactly what was going on. And immediately people in this area, although they were not close to the south, first checked family members, friends, and other close people whom they know, and everybody knows everybody in Israel because it's such a small country, in the south of Israel. So that was the first thing. The second thing, almost instinctively, was the fact that we were so close to Tulkarem, to other Palestinian cities, and immediately there was a fear that this will be a premeditated kind of a comprehensive attack from other fronts as well, because it's so close. And just to emphasize how close, just to bring it home, it's about 200 meters close to the first village, Israeli village in undisputed Israel. So
you're saying where you live is 200 meters from?
I live another kilometer inside Israel, more, which is nothing. It's a 3-minute ride, but there are certain line of villages, Israeli villages, that are literally on the border from the Israeli side, and it's literally 200 meters. You can convert that into what speaks to Americans in terms of distance, but it's absolutely nothing. You sneeze and you're 200 meters. There you are.
And depending on where you are, you're either seeing a wall or an electronic fence or whatever. But when you hear that the fences have been breached in the south and thousands of terrorists have infiltrated, you think, well, could that happen?
4,000 heavily armed terrorists. In other words, with RPGs, with guns, machine guns, motorcycles, trucks. It's not just terrorists. It's not Palestinians. It's 4,000 armed commando soldiers of Hamas, and another approximately 4,000, half of whom came in, there were so-called civilians, the poor civilian Palestinians who came in and raped, massacred, burnt, killed, and carnaged civilians. Jewish grandmothers, Thai agricultural workers. I will describe some of the things that were done because, with all respect and all respect to politically correct, you have to hear what actually happened, because this is not a human act.
So before you do that, Ruth, let me just say, if you're listening to this podcast in your car with your children, I just want to caution you, why don't you pause it here and come back and listen a little bit later, but I just want to be, family friendly here. But Ruth is going to share some things that are very, very hard. And I just want to make sure that if you're listening in your home or wherever else you're listening, you're going to hear some tough things right now. But I agree with you, Ruth. They are important. So I just, with that disclaimer and giving parents a chance to hit the pause if they're not ready for young people to hear it, I
You're
respect.
absolutely
Okay.
right. I would also add, not even ironically or sarcastically, that if you're eating, perhaps wait until you finish, because this will definitely spoil your appetite. But there were thousands of Hamas operatives in Gaza at the same time who actually operated the thousands of rockets, the barrage of rockets that were rained upon civilians of Israel throughout the country, not only towards the south of Israel. And this was an unusual barrage. It wasn't something that was only, for a minute or two or five. This was a very long, thousands of rocket, heavy barrage of significant rockets, making people run to the shelters, because the Israeli leadership has always, doesn't matter which government is in power, made sure that there are either shelters outside of your home, or if you're living in a newly built home, it's compulsory, it's obligatory to have a shelter, significant shelter, rocket-proof shelter inside your home. This is mandatory and usual, which sounds normal to us Israelis, but it's not normal to have a shelter, an anti-rocket shelter inside your house, if you think about it, if you're a regular, normal human being. So everybody was running to the shelters where they thought they would be safe. Little did people know, because this came as a surprise and it took the Israeli establishment by surprise, unfortunately, and also the Israeli intelligence by surprise, unfortunately. And this, of course, will be investigated in a very deep manner, please God. But people were taken by surprise. They ran to the shelters from the rocket barrage in order not to get killed. And then thousands of Hamas commando operatives started to go house by house, eliminating mothers, fathers, children, babies. There are videos that they themselves posted. Now, why did they do that? In order to raise the morale of the Palestinian people. I want you to try and comprehend that. You raise the morale of a people by slaughtering. This is not killing. This is slaughter. You don't even slaughter animals in this way. By slaughter, this is like the Middle Ages, people. Now, I'm sorry, but I will be very blunt. Joel, I apologize. I know that religious people watch this, but this is what was done. And I apologize in advance. I'm a very respectful person, but you must know, penises were cut off of the men, women and men were raped. This is haram in Islam, to rape, but for a man to be with a man is haram. It's not allowed. It's the biggest shame in serious radical, especially radicals. This is unheard of. The fact that LGBT demonstrate for these people is insanity to me, because they will immediately throw LGBTs off rooftops. But they did this to our people. They killed grandmothers, grandfathers. Some people went into a town called Ofakim. Ofakim is a little town in the south of Israel. It's not a village, it's a town. And there are high rises, there are buildings, let's say 4 stories and so on. Because a lot of these 4 stories are old, relatively old, they don't have the security rooms inside their flats. They have them just outside the building, shelters, bomb shelters. Older people, a lot of Russian speaking, older people, in Ofakim, in the very early morning, or some people coming back from the synagogue, Shabbat morning, ran or went down the stairs to the shelters. These terrorists were well prepared. They had maps on their bodies. A lot of those who were later killed by Israeli defense forces and policemen, maps were found on their bodies with specific neighborhoods, specific buildings. They knew that people would run down to the shelters outside, and they were ready in the staircase. These heroes, men, heavily armed men, killed, shot with machine guns, grandmothers, 8-year-olds, Holocaust survivors, women, children, running down the stairs to the shelter.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that I don't want anyone to miss the sarcasm there. She's describing them as heroes. Obviously, she's using sarcasm there. So I just want to make sure people understand that this is bloodthirsty. I believe they were demon possessed. That's not a term that I use lightly, and it's not a term that you hear much in Israeli society or certainly in the mainstream media. But I don't believe that a human being can do that over and over and over again with glee. We do know that they found there were a number of the terrorists who were killed, who we found the idea found in their pockets a certain type of drug, a hallucinogenic drug that would give them even.
So let me just say a word about this drug.
Say it again. I was speaking over you, so go ahead. Why don't you?
Keptagon. A lot of them, not all of them, but a lot of them were with this drug, Keptagon. It's a drug that is smuggled by the Islamic Republic of Iran to the West Bank, to Gaza, to the Hezbollah in Lebanon via Jordan, which is relatively weak. It's so-called the island of stability. That is also, I'm saying this cynically, because it's supposedly an ally of Israel and of the United States of America, but its borders are not hermetic enough against the intrusion of the Islamic Republic of Iran. And armaments and drugs are being smuggled for years via their borders. That's just a side comment, but I want to go, with your permission, Joel, and I apologize again for being graphic, into a little bit more detail.
Okay.
After
Actually,
killing...
hold that 1 second. We're going to go to a break. We're going to give people a chance to catch their breath. When we come back, we're going to continue this. It's a hard conversation. I totally understand if you need to, skip this episode, but it's important as we approach October 7th that people understand some things that just aren't being told in the media. So stand by. We'll be back. I'm Joel Rosenberg, your host of the Inside the Epicenter podcast. We'll be back with my very special guest, former member of Israeli Knesset, Ruth Wasserman Lande, in just a minute. Before we go back to Ruth, I just want to share a couple verses from Psalm 83. Now, this is interesting because I don't believe that Psalm 83 is a prophecy about a specific set of events that will happen. Some Bible prophecy experts believe that. I don't believe that, but I do believe that it is a prophetic insight into the mind of Israel's enemies. And as you listen to these verses, you'll understand. The writer of this psalm says, "O God, do not remain quiet. Do not be silent. And O God, do not be still. For behold, your enemies make an uproar." Right? The psalmist is not even talking about the enemies of Israel. They are the enemies of Israel, but he's saying they're your enemies, and they're in a rage. Those who hate you have exalted themselves. It said they make shrewd plans against your people and conspire together against your treasured ones. They have said, "Come and let us wipe them out as a nation, that the name of Israel be remembered no more. For they have conspired together with one mind. Against you they make a covenant." And then the psalmist cites the ancient names that are a lot of the enemies of Israel today. It talks about the Ishmaelites. These are Arabs. They talk about the forces of the Philistines. Well, that's the Palestinians have taken their very name, and they say in Arabic, Palestinim. They take it from this. Current Palestinians are not actually ethnically genetically related to the Philistines of thousands of years ago, but they identify with these enemies of Israel, these enemies of God. That's their choice of their name. They talk about Tyre and Sidon, which is Lebanon, and they talk about others. So it's interesting that the psalmist, writing more about 3,000 years ago, is describing a specific set of groups of people. Not to say that every person in that group of people believes this, but that there are going to be enemies who do believe this. And it's like the psalmist is giving us an x-ray into their hearts, into their souls, how demonically driven they are to wipe us out as a people. I hope that you'll process that passage on your own with family and friends today and the days ahead, because I think it'll help give you some insight into what we're really up against. And I would add some prayer requests that you'd continue to pray for all the hostages to be released. We're going to talk about the hostages in a moment and the big fights that are going on inside Israel, in the Israeli government, in the cabinets, at the highest levels over what's the right way forward. And so please be praying for all of these 101 hostages to be released and for God to supernaturally bring healing and comfort to the hostages themselves and their families and their friends and all who've been traumatized in Israel, but also among the Palestinians and the Lebanese by this horrific, sick, and seemingly never-ending war. Welcome back to the Inside the Epicenter podcast. I'm Joel Rosenberg, founder and chairman of the Joshua Fund, and we're grateful to have you with us. It's a tough show. This episode of Inside the Epicenter is really about some of the real horror that happened on October 7th. We've often talked about it in broad and general terms. We're not doing that this time. As we get to the 1 year mark, most people, even Christians who support Israel, love Israel, and feel like they feel fairly well versed on what this past year has looked like, even we have not dealt with these types of graphic details. But I think as we get to this moment, you need at least an opportunity to hear from a trusted resource. And I hope that we can be that for you on Inside the Epicenter. So with that biblical and sort of prayerful context, Ruth, thank you so much for continuing with us in the second part of this Inside the Epicenter podcast. Okay, with all the forewarning that we've asked people, look, if you're eating, if you're with children, if you're with anybody that doesn't want to hear some of the graphic details of what happened on October 7th, or if you yourself are like, I can't do it, or I can't do it right this moment, I get that. I respect that. I just want to give you forewarning. This is not a show like most of our normal Inside the Epicenter episodes. So, Ruth, continue to share with us these hard facts of what happened that day. Thank you for doing it.
I remind everybody that I do not live in the South. I did not go through this myself. My family, thank God, didn't go through this, but people that we know. And, everybody knows everybody in Israel. It's a small country, as I said before. Experience things that, we sort of think about the Holocaust when we think about things like that. Not modern day. Crazy, absolutely insane. Women not only women, I said before the break, also men were raped. In fact, some were gang raped, but they were also not only raped, they were mutilated. Their breasts were cut off and other parts of their bodies were cut off. There were, some of them were so brutally raped that their pelvises, and this was found when their bodies were found later by people who collect the bodies and recognize them. Their pelvises were outside of their, displaced, or I don't know how to even describe it. Some sharp, external, unnatural ornaments or things were put inside their bodies. Again, I apologize for the graphics, but in the vaginas. The atrocities are so horrific that one wonders what kind of indoctrination does huge body of people need to go through in order to be capable of performing such atrocities. You need to be in a certain state of mind. So over and above the issue of the drugs that some of them were taking, this is not enough to explain the vastness of the horrifying atrocities.
Right, because these are people who want to do this, plan to do this, are not sick, and as they do it, they are re-energized. They are calling their mothers and fathers on the phone and telling them proudly, "This is what I'm doing. I've killed 10 Jews. Dad, I killed 10 Jews with my own hands."
Even more than that, I mean, can you imagine calling your mom and bragging about killing people? But more than that, let's take another example, which is it's absolutely. We are now talking about the civilians, the poor civilians, and I'm not saying that there are not a few civilians who are not connected, but there are very many who are very much indoctrinated into this horrific hatred against Israelis, Jews, and the West, all those who are not Muslim. And why do I say that? A lot of these so-called civilians, I'll give just one example, and I think it would epitomize the rest. The father, the son, and the uncle. So imagine yourself going with your son and with your brother to a home, raping a woman and her teenage daughter, and then sending your son to do the same. And then the uncle to do the same. And then, knowing about it in the family, it's not even unethical. It's shameful. It's something
it's wicked.
that one
That's
would...
sheer evil. That, even if we say, like, if we talk about the Yom Kippur War that happened, the invasion by Egypt and Syria 50 years to the day before this October 7th attack, you're talking about soldiers invading to get land back. Was it horrible? Yes. Was the killing horrible? Yes. Were there war crimes committed during that? Yes. But actually nothing. It's nothing. That's almost normal, horrible warfare. Nothing like this. This is in some ways, not at the scale, but the style, worse than the Nazis. And it's very much
like the Nazis, except the Nazis did it for several years,
right?
And this was 8 long hours, and of course for the hostages that are still there, almost 400 days, which is absolutely crazy.
All right, so we could talk about the atrocities more, and I want to say to you, but I'm really speaking mostly to the audience. One of the things that I've had the opportunity to do, when I met with the Prime Minister in December, with my friend, evangelical Christian and former Governor Mike Huckabee, one of the things he and his colleagues, his team, asked us to do was to show or invite evangelical leaders in the United States to come to a series of showings of about a 45-minute compilation that the IDF had put together of video imagery, mostly from GoPro cameras or phones that the Hamas terrorists were using themselves to videotape what they wanted the world to see. Some of it CCTV footage from Israeli kibbutzim or dash cam imagery. But you got about 45 minutes, and so the Prime Minister and his team were asking us, look, a lot of you, we're not just going to show everybody this footage. And even this footage is not all that there is or as bad as it was, but people can only take so much. But people need to bear witness to the horrors of that day. And so would you be willing, Joel, to, help us establish some showings of this film, invitation only to key evangelical leaders all across the country, pastors and so forth. So if they're willing to come and see just some of it. So we did that at the Israeli Embassy in Washington, at the National Religious Broadcasters Convention in, I think, Nashville at that time, and on a number of Christian college campuses and so forth. So anyway, there's more we could say about that, but I want to shift, Ruth, to the hostages now, because there's a big fight, a huge fight between Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his own defense minister, Yoav Gallant over what's the right way forward. And I want to set this up for a moment, and then I wonder, I know you have a political perspective, and I'm inviting you on to share it, not because I'm not taking a side. I have a view, but I want evangelicals to understand that this is not right now a Trump versus Biden fight over policy. This is, yes, you're the head of your party, Benny Gantz, who was in the war cabinet in a national emergency unity government with Netanyahu, but left because out of some severe disagreements with Netanyahu about the prosecution of war. Yes, your boss is now in the opposition. You're not currently serving in the Knesset. And of course, Yair Lapid, who is the head of the opposition, he, of course, deeply disagreed with Netanyahu. But the purpose of this part of the conversation is this is a fight within the Likud party. Okay, that's the ruling party right now, or the main party. They've got a number of parties with them in their coalition, but the prime minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, is diametrically opposed to his own defense minister, who's also part of the Likud party and is his hand-chosen defense minister. And Yoav Gallant has said for much of this year, the way to force Hamas to release all the hostages, or at least as many as possible, is to put so much military pressure on them that they basically cry uncle and say, okay, let's make a deal.
Okay, so allow me to comment on that, please. First of all, I would like to speak to your audience, Joel, as a human being and as a mother and as a woman, rather than a politician. I would feel more comfortable because this transcends politics. It's not.
I want you to do that, but give me 1 second more because I want to again put the context so people understand what you're commenting on. Gallant is saying that we are at that moment. We put so much pressure on Hamas that, yes, we're going to need to back out of this corridor between Israel, or Gaza and Egypt for a while, but that's okay. We can afford that. Hamas cannot resupply itself with arms and ammunition enough in that period of time. So that'll be, don't worry, but we need these hostages out. It's been essentially a year. And Netanyahu has said, I'll make a deal, but I'm not pulling our forces out of that corridor. And Gallant is saying there's no other way to get them out. We've gotten to the moment that we need. And so this is to watch that fight. All Israelis have their own views, but it's a painful fight because it's not a left-right fight. It's not a government versus the opposition. It's that too, but it's a fight within the party and so within the ruling party. So I just want to give that frame because most evangelicals in the United States, Canada, around the world aren't watching that closely. But that's the fight. How do we get our people out before it's too late? Okay, in that context now, Ruth, why don't you share as a mother? But I wanted people to know your political background, so you do have a perspective, and we're going to have others from different perspectives on. But I'm just saying, I think your perspective is important, and I want people to hear it among others. Okay.
So let me just say right up front that I belong to the Blue and White Party. It's a centrist party. The head of my party currently is in the opposition after leaving, as you said, the war cabinet. And I do not belong to the current leadership and or government ruling party, the Likud. And yet what I'm about to say, honestly, is not from a political point of view. I feel very strongly about the fact that this transcends politics. It's not a right or a left, although some people take it to the right or the left and play it. It's such, I don't envy any decision maker at this particular moment, having 101 hostages. We know some of whom are not alive. We have no information, or not nearly as enough information as would be expected in other scenarios from the International Red Cross or any other international aid organization, a human rights organization, or any of that kind of thing. Who is alive, who is not alive, what is their situation, what is their medical situation, and so on and so forth. And we also know that some of these hostages, and we've seen evidence of this recently, all of us in Israel, because 6 hostages were actually shot dead, in other words, executed. They were not found dead like the BBC said in their big headline. They were not found dead, they were executed just before the IDF could come and rescue them, after surviving in absolutely dehumanizing conditions for 11 whole months. That means that women and men were held together in a very narrow tunnel without breathing facilities, hardly any water, hardly any food. Some of them, their bodies were found by the IDF. They could not have been made away with their bodies, and they were emancipated. They were starved. There was emancipated. They were literally starved, which is inhumane. They did their excuse me, but their needs, they went to the bathroom together. I mean, the men and the women in the same place, and there wasn't even toilet facilities. Horrific circumstances, not to mention what kind of torture they may or may not have experienced during this period of their captivity.
Were so narrow that they couldn't stand up. It was, or lie down. Right, you couldn't even lie. Everyone couldn't even sleep at the same time. And I've been in those tunnels. The IDF took me into those tunnels. Not the one that this is, but the air is very thin. It's very humid. And if they turn off the lights, I mean, you're underground. You're 60, 70 meters underground. There's no light. I can't imagine. I had a hard time being there for an afternoon. Okay. And then I got to come home to Jerusalem and take a shower and change and kiss my wife and sit down. And I was rattled by a half a day in those terror tunnels. And the idea that somebody's spending 11 months in them with with fading hope that anyone's going to come get them.
And not only that, Joe, the issue is that these people are civilians. They were kidnapped from their beds, their homes, after seeing family members being massacred. Some of them were in the music festival, dancing, completely helpless civilians, unarmed, and no one is shouting loudly in the world. On the contrary, Israel is being blamed for what? For attempting to prevent what the Hamas themselves say, and they say it openly without shame. We plan to do it again and again and again. They say it in Arabic in endless interviews, which is insanity to me. This is casus belli. It's a declaration of war. Now, one thing before we leave, and I have to make sure that it's said, this is an arm of the Islamic Republic of Iran, one arm. The Hamas in Gaza is one arm of the Islamic Republic of Iran. They armed them, they trained them, they encouraged them, they helped to create a worldwide campaign against Israel and the Jews and to infiltrate different groups in order to affect public opinion. This has been done for years and years in Europe, in Canada, in Australia, in America, and so on. Now, the issue is that it's not only in the south. In the West Bank, the same is being done by Iran for Hamas and for the Islamic Jihad. Remember, I told you in the beginning that in the West Bank, the ruler of the West Bank, the internationally recognized Abu Mazen or Mahmoud Abbas, the Fatah leader, is the so-called president of this autonomy called the Palestinian autonomy. So what Iran is trying to do for years is undermine the Fatah leader, the leadership, and that regime, because the Fatah and the Hamas cannot stand each other either. And this is radical Islam versus communist-oriented secular Islam. Now, this is in the West Bank, fully armed, RPGs, bombs, weapons, indoctrination, educational system, incitement and hatred in Gaza, in the West Bank, all carried out by taxpayers' money via UNRWA. This is the longest existing refugee, so-called refugee UN body in the entire universe. They've been refugees forever. For some unknown reason, they have not been rehabilitated into the West Bank, into self-governed Palestinian Gaza. They're still so-called refugees. But this organization, UNRWA, allows the Hamas, and there are pictures. It's not Israel saying you do not need to rely on Israel. They use their offices, their schools, their hospitals as headquarters to cover up what this terrorist organization is doing. And literally, it's the representative of the Islamic Republic of Iran. Now, Iran is also infiltrated Lebanon, and it has the Hezbollah, took control over Lebanon after it disintegrated the country from within, did the same in Syria, disintegrated the country from within, slowly took over. Now it's moving Shiite militias into Syria. For example, there are Houthis moving into Syria. They did the same thing in Iraq. Disintegrated country, no opposition, took the Shiite militias, overtaking the Christians, the long-living Christians community in Iraq, one of the oldest Christian communities, and completely disintegrating it, taking over Christian sites in Iraq, and then creating a territorial continuity: Iran, Iraq, Lebanon, Syria, and don't forget the Yemen, that in Yemen they also have the Houthis and that arm of Shiite Islam. This is the beginning, only the beginning of their aim, and they say it, this is the ideology in the Quran. They look at the long-term overtaking the world. Now, I know it sounds a bit horrific, difficult to comprehend or believe, but it is what it is. And the only thing that is bothering or disturbing their territorial continuity is Jordan and Israel.
Well, I would also add the Sunni Gulf states that are against them, but also feel very vulnerable, which has brought, in recent years, Israel together with the UAE and with Bahrain and with the Saudis. But it is a battle for the control first of the region and then eventually for the world. We only have a few minutes, Ruth. So tie together where you think this is going, but also make sure to comment on what is your view of the right way to get the hostages out? And I know I'm asking you to take a position. I just want our audience to hear a position. They may have a different view. We're fairly covering it from multiple angles, but what's yours?
So I'll begin with saying what I think will happen, and I apologize if I sound a little bit pessimistic. I'm a deep believer in God. Thank God I believe in God, because it keeps me strong. I'm speaking to an audience that is faithful, and I want to share with you that Iran is planning a multifaceted attack on Israel. And the reason it is doing it against Israel, in order to become the victor of the Islamic world first. And why would it become the victor? Because it will gain in its vision Jerusalem, the holy Jerusalem, for all religions, Christian, Muslim, and Jewish, but of course for the Islamic religion as well. And then move on. And by the way, they're doing it simultaneously. They're not waiting to infiltrate Europe and the United States of America. I don't have time to go into explaining how. They've been doing this deeply, significantly, and systematically over years. Now, what they are going to do is continue with their quest for weapons of mass destruction, nuclear power, which the world needs to stop. Otherwise, it is to the detriment of the entire Western world. But at the same time, what they're trying to do, and they're doing it, is to weaken and exhaust Israel by attacking it via Lebanon, Syria, the West Bank, East Jerusalem from within, by some Arab elements, not all Arab Israelis, but some Arab elements that they indoctrinate as well, plus the south, the Gazan front, and of course, with the help of the Houthis in Yemen and the Shiite militias in Iraq. They are on the side. They're quiet. They sent 300 missiles to kill Israeli civilians. This was thwarted by Israel and its allies in the region, as well as some foreign countries like the US, UK, and so on. But the plan that Iran holds is to weaken and exhaust Israel. And then, once it will be very, very, very near the nuclear weapon, attack full-blown war Israel from all fronts together. We will not have the privilege to stop Gaza and go on to the north, stop the north and take care of the West Bank, stop the West Bank and take care of inside. No. That's why they envelop. That's why they are moving Houthis to Syria. That's why they are taking over Christian communities in Iraq. That's why they are already instigating a lot of unrest in Jordan by supporting the Hamas and the radical Islam. And what they're doing is smuggling weapons. And this is a world.
What should Israel do, both A, with the
Okay.
hostages, and B, strategically? I know we only have a few minutes. We'll have to have you back, but
Israel needs allies, and Israel needs, unfortunately, I'm a liberal. I don't belong to any far left, any very far right. I'm a liberal. I believe in humanity. But this is not a time for politically correct, unfortunately, because we are dealing with people who are brainwashed, indoctrinated, and bent on destroying us. And therefore, it is virtually impossible, in my humble opinion. I say virtually because it's not 100%. To negotiate with these murderers. The only way they understand negotiation is like in the Quran. It says you may negotiate a temporary peace, but only as long as you're weak and until you gain strength. When you gain strength, you can break any agreement and then surprise the so-called enemy and murder, rape, carnage, burn, whatever. But you can negotiate when you are temporarily weak, when you cannot take by strength. Therefore, we need to go by their book, by their laws. Weaken. Now, the international arena watches every single step that Israel makes, every single civilian that Israel, God forbid, and tragically, unintentionally hurts because they hide behind their own civilians, hoping that they will die. They hide behind schools, they hide behind hospitals. They hid the hostages under a child's room. They hide weapons in children's rooms and wardrobes. They are insane. And if we don't put aside everything we stand for and everything we believe in, which is humanity and preserving life, just to be able to weaken them in order to be able to stop this insane quest of murder, then we can make a better position to negotiate for the return of those poor, mutilated, horribly defenseless hostages that are still there, which the entire world should stand on its hind legs and scream, not against Israel, but to the Hamas, to the United Nations, against Iran for keeping them there. It's insane.
We only have a few moments, so I just want to be clear. Are you saying at this moment, after the murder, the execution of 6 more hostages, that as much as you want to get the hostages out, you actually don't believe that the Hamas leadership right now wants to negotiate in good faith, and therefore you have to just keep fighting, keep pushing, not because you don't want the hostages out, because you're dealing with mass murderers who are not trying to genuinely make a deal. Is that what you're saying?
I think that everything should be done to make sure to maximize and optimize those negotiations. I'm an expert on Arab affairs. I understand Arab mentality. I understand the language. I studied Islam and the Quran. From my understanding, and I say this with humility, we have a moral obligation to get those hostages out. If we can opt for the negotiation with a very high price, as much as this hurts me and may hurt the country, we have a moral obligation to get them out. I don't believe in the sincerity of the other side in these negotiations at all. At all. Unfortunately. It doesn't mean that we don't need to do everything.
Just to be clear, I think what you're saying, but then we got to wrap. I think what you're saying is you're sympathetic to Gallant's point that we might be at or close to the point to make a deal. But the problem is you also are sympathetic to the prime minister of the government's position right now, which is if a deal was possible, we would make it. But they're not yet ready. If you murder 6 people right when the negotiations are seemingly at a finality, it means you're not serious. So
I want to just please reiterate, I don't care about Gallant's opinion, and I don't care about Netanyahu's opinion, and I don't care about any politician's opinion. This is not the issue.
I understand that, but still, this is the moment.
And professional analysis as somebody who understands the language, the mechanisms, and again, I say this with humility, because it's very, very, very insanely difficult to get into the brain of people who are not really people. But from that analysis, from the professional understanding and learning, the deep learning and analysis and examination, this is what I believe their mentality and their state of mind is. And they will not compromise. They actually haven't compromised 1 millimeter since the beginning of the negotiation. If you examine their position from the beginning, the only party that the West is able to pressure in this equation is Israel, because Israel is a normal entity. Good, bad, not perfect, okay, but normal. And it can be pressured because it's a democracy. But there's no pressure on Hamas. There's no pressure on Iran. Why?
All right. I really appreciate, Ruth, your time. It's been a lot of it, and your insights. You've had sobering and hard things to say to us, but we need to hear it, and we have to understand who we're really up against. So thank you so much, Ruth.
Thank you, and pray for Israel and for our hostages to return. All the good people that believe. I also believe in prayer.
Thank you. Thank you for serving on the All Israel News Advisory Board. Thank you for building this relationship, not just with me, but evangelical Christians. I think we need to do more to bring Israeli leaders who understand, some of them understand generally that the evangelicals are Israel's best friends because of the size and depth of our love. But not every Israeli leader feels comfortable or capable of working on those relationships. So I'm glad that you and I have been doing that, and may your tribe increase, because I think evangelicals care about these issues and we want to do more to help. But we need to keep learning, and we need Israeli leaders. Netanyahu gets it. I love that you connected me early on to Benny Gantz, and I met with Yair Lapid and others. So, but there's more that needs to be done deeper into the system. Thank you so much to you, Ruth. Bless you. And I want to thank all of you listening and watching the YouTube version of this Inside the Epicenter podcast. You can learn more about Ruth Wasserman Lande and her bio and a link in our show notes. I encourage you to do that. You can also, of course, send us your comments and your questions and your recommendations for future shows. But this has been a good, hard, sobering program. I think it's necessary. And I want to thank Ruth for doing it, and I want to thank you, those of you who have made it through. Thank you for listening carefully. On behalf of the Joshua Fund team and the Inside the Epicenter podcasting team, I'm Joel Rosenberg, co-founder and chairman of the Joshua Fund, and your co-host with my wife, who will be back on the next program. But thank you for listening to this edition of Inside the Epicenter. God bless you from Jerusalem. I'm Joel Rosenberg. I'll be with you again on the next edition.
I'm Joel Rosenberg. On your left, you'll find some videos we've chosen specifically for you. We look forward to partnering with you to bless Israel and her neighbors in the name of Jesus.